former sheriff's detective and investigator who joins us live now via Zoom. And Jamie, we appreciate you joining us.
Good to be with you, Garrett. Thank you.
We heard, well, let's just start here. Day 19. I mean, who would have thought when something like this first began that we would still be here talking with not knowing a whole lot more than we did back then, even.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking. It's day 19. We still have no answers in terms of where Nancy Guthrie is. Is she still with us? Is she not with us? But more importantly, it sounds to me that the Pima County Sheriff's Office is on the case. And, we have a lot of federal resources there on the ground in Tucson. So, to be announced, but it's a grueling case from what it appears.
The sheriff yesterday saying that the case has not gone cold, but he is concerned about the case, would go cold when the tips dry up. So encouraging people to continue to send tips and share anything they may know about that. What is your reaction to hearing that? Does that sound like a message that would be coming from investigators who feel like they are close to cracking this?
The sheriff's pretty confident in terms of, he keeps indicating there are 400 investigators on the ground. So, that's just in Tucson. In regards to the cold case, Garrett, I don't think we're anywhere near labeling the Nancy Guthrie kidnapping as a cold case based on the array and thousands of tips. It's my understanding from Fox Digital that these tips are continually coming in daily. So, here's the fortunate part. Those tips come in, every one of those tips have to be looked at and followed up on, meaning somebody's going to go out and knock on a door or make contact with that tipster or, vet out the information the tipster called in. So, according to the sheriff, according to some of the FBI sources, they're still receiving a large amount of tips in this case. Also to include potential international connections. Let's not leave that out.
We've seen reporting that the FBI has contacted authorities in Mexico. We know one of the letters that TMZ received said that Nancy's being held south of the border. How does something like that change things when it comes to this investigation?
Yeah, I mean, as the crow would fly, Garrett, from the Guthrie home, we're looking at about 60 miles, which, could possibly be an hour and a half, depending on how fast you go. But here's the kicker and the takeaway from that. Harvey Levin came out and in fact said the individual that sent this last demand letter wanting money for information specified that he had actually saw what looked to appear to be Nancy Guthrie in Mexico. The other oddity on that letter is he used the word them or they told him to shut up. So indicating that it was more than one abductor, if you will. The good thing is we know that the federal government has a pretty good working relationship with the Mexican government. Certainly FBI and the local federales in Mexico have a working relationship. So, they're going to go down there and try to flush out some leads. They're going to follow up on whatever information we may not know in this latest demand letter that they could be following up on.
An FBI source told the New York Post that despite them believing there could be some sort of tie with people in Mexico, there is no evidence of cartel involvement. I would imagine that has to be a good thing.
Yeah, and that New York Post article, it really struck a chord with me. I mean, we know how violent the cartels are. I don't think if it was a cartel-involved kidnapping, I don't think we would be at day 19. We probably would have, unfortunately, may have found a body of Nancy Guthrie, right? The cartel doesn't play. They're pretty spiteful in terms of what their actions are. Speculating, Garrett, as we all do, it perhaps could be someone that had seen someone from Mexico or even from the U.S. potentially bring her across the border. We just don't know. There's not a lot of factual facts out there that we can go on, and certainly we're all speculating as to what may be happening.
The sheriff this week, and we've seen the pleas from Savannah Guthrie as well, just urging the kidnapper to let her go, to come forward, trying to appeal to any sort of sense of empathy or compassion. What does that mean at this point?
It would telegraph and make you ask the question, are they in fact communicating with the kidnappers? It's not really been released. There's nothing factual that would say that. But certainly those pleas from not only Savannah, but the entire family on those grueling videos that we've watched, just heartbreaking, right? but she's certainly pleading. At one point, Garrett, let's back up a little bit. She said, "We will pay." So, that was an indicator to me that possibly they may not have had any communication, and they were perhaps prompting the kidnappers to reach out back to them to open that avenue of communication. A lot of unknowns in this case.
Yeah, this surveillance video, we continue to kind of watch and pore over. It was I had to imagine a setback this week when that glove that matched or appeared to match the glove that we see there in the surveillance video didn't come back with any matches from the national FBI database, the CODIS database. And so we've learned that investigators are now using investigative genetic genealogy, which for those who may not know, was the technique that was used to catch Brian Koberger in the 2022 Idaho student murder. So I mean, this is that we talk about potential setback this week, but all is not lost when it comes to what may have been found from that glove, Jamie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great piece of evidence. They're certainly following up and continuing to investigate that glove. So that would, kind of indicate or telegraph that glove may or probably is connected to the crime. And like I said, the Brian Kohlberger case, that was paramount in that case to solve that issue. So, here's the thing. The sheriff has taken a couple hits on the news, Garrett. The crime scene, et cetera, sending lab samples to Florida rather than the FBI. The end result is they're all working together. I do not think there's any rift between the feds and the Pima County Sheriff's Office based on what we're seeing with this glove. We know that Quantico accepted that glove. They're doing their own testing on it. So I don't think a lot was lost in that. But I think the genealogy thing is going to be interesting. It's solved that case. Plus, I mean, you can go back and trace your ancestors. So we know it works. It's just a matter of putting the dots together and making that happen, which I would suggest they're working on that immediately.
Fox News Digital reporting that an Arizona gun store owner was asked by an FBI agent to review their recent gun purchases tied to a list of nearly 24 people. Should we glean anything from that? What do you make of that news?
The takeaway from that, Garrett, is how did they come up with a list of allegedly 40 people on that list to go to these gun stores? Unknown, right? We've seen a couple of search warrants out of this case. We've seen a couple of people being detained. And we know for a fact that digital devices were seized during both of those searches of those homes. So, are they associates of those people? But where did the 40 people come from or the couple dozen of people they're asking for? But here's the good news. They have some leads in terms of people or persons that they're actively following up on. If we can add to that, the backpack, the holster of the weapon that we saw on that grueling video, we know special agents went to Walmart, and Walmart is actually working on who may have purchased that item, the backpack or the holster, and they're going through hours of surveillance video to try to maybe perhaps match up who was in line buying either item. So a lot to take in here.
Yeah, a lot to take in. We know a lot of stuff going on in the background, and at the same time, I think as every day passes, people continue to ask more and more questions about, whether things are going in a good direction.
The sheriff took another hit on the pressers, the lack of press conferences, right? Garrett, I truly believe the sheriff is well measured in his communication. He's doing some local interviews. He did an interview with Fox Digital, we know. But going out behind the microphone, I don't think it's really helping the case. But here's my other point to that. The less the cops talk, the more pressure the bad guys are going to feel in this case. And you want to kind of keep them hunkered down. If in fact they're holding her at a location, you don't want them moving her. So if we have enough information coming out, but it's not what we see, it's what we don't see as a bad guy. So, I'm quite certain they're getting some pressure. But I think the sheriff is doing well in his communications. I think these independent interviews are a little bit more fruitful than standing behind the mic getting zinged with 100 questions and not being able to say nothing but I can't comment on that, right? So we'll see what happens. I think he's going to have to come out to do a presser soon, just to build additional confidence within the American people. Garrett, it's America's grandmother that's missing, so we're all vested.
I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, the confidence aspect, because you talk about the social media chatter and things like that we're seeing, that it doesn't seem like there is a whole lot of confidence. I think people may be wanting to hear him say, let her go. We're on your heels right now. But that's just not kind of what we've seen in this.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the sheriff needs a PR person. I mean, he may seem weak at times. I didn't like that plea. Please let her go, right? Of course, we want the kidnappers to let her go. But I think coming from a sheriff, he should have been a little bit stronger in his language. Donald Trump had made an indication that if we catch you, you're going to have an issue with the federal government, and we're going to take her back at whatever force is necessary. Paraphrasing, but that was speculative of what Trump said, right? But the sheriff is, if he's going to speak, I think he needs to be a little bit stronger in his language and really plead to us, the American people who are vested and sitting on the edge of our seats, wanting America's grandmother back. I would like to see a little bit more stronger language from the sheriff than what we've seen in the past.
Jamie, what are you going to be watching for? I think I ask you this every time we talk. What are you watching for in the coming hours, the coming days?
It's all going to come back down to the science, the glove, the DNA matches. Will the genealogy work? But more importantly, are they going to continue developing leads and developing probable cause for additional search warrants at other homes detaining individuals? So, I'm going to look for that. They're not stopping. I will say this. The sheriff may take a couple of hits here and there, but he is dedicated to the case. I think he's 100% vested, and he's not going to go without any stone uncovered until they bring her home, Garrett.
Right, former sheriff's detective and investigator Jamie Copenhaver, we always appreciate you joining us, and good talking with you today here on Fox 35 News Plus.
Thanks, Garrett.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.